Hello, and welcome to the Paid Search Association monthly webinar. Today we have Brad Geddes from Analysis. I am going to be fast with my intro, so hopefully my background noise is not too distracting here. This is going to be a fantastic webinar, and we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube, so feel free to ask your questions, and we'll have time for questions at the end. And Brad, it's off to the races.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. That was quick. So, hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about match types and bid strategies. But when you look at most conversations, they're either what match types are best should I use, or what bid strategies should we use? And the reality is the conversation needs to happen simultaneous. As you change a bid strategy, your most effective match types also change. And so today I'm going to go through a bunch of stats in this study that kind of looks at how each match type performs a bid strategy when people are switching bid strategies, based upon data. A match type which has kind of lost its way and it's not broad match. And then some more stats on just like, here's what actually most people are using. So, at Analysis, we're a PPC management platform, and we have access to a tremendous amount of data. So we looked at, almost 17,000 search campaigns. Anything that was anomalous or without conversions, et cetera, we removed. We segmented brand versus non-brand just to really understand what's happening non-brand. Well, I've got some brand stats in here. Most of this is what you should be seeing with the majority of your non-branded campaigns. And we wanted to use advertisers from everywhere, not just USD centric or US centric. So, we did look at some, European and Asian and African, accounts and put everything into USD. So it should be global as far as how this works. Now, as the beginner 101 reminder, right? Exact match just says, I have a keyword. I want the search intent to be the same as what someone's looking for. Then you have phrase match, which has the same intent, but can expand to other info. And this is a little tricky right now. And then broad match says, show me for something related. Now, in the past, broad match, rightfully so, has had a very bad reputation. And Google's been trying to clean it up for probably 5 years now. And in the last year or so, broad match has gotten much better. And I'm not sure it's because the definitions of broad match have gotten better. I think it's because Google is using additional signals more effectively in serving broad match. And so one of those signals is previous search history. What did you do before? Right. And now you're searching something similar, but you said this exact thing before. Well, this word is actually more related. Right. And that's something broad can do. The other match types can't. Doesn't mean broad's always the best to use, but it's a signal type that is inherent to broad. Exact and phrase don't have access to. So now we're going to look at each bid method itself, right? All the bid strategies. So when you look at max clicks, right, this goal is to get the most clicks possible. So this system does not care about your CPA, your conversions, your ROAS, your bounce rates, traffic quality. So we'll look at what those are. But in reality, when we think about max clicks, all we should be judging it on is click-through rate. So, broad match makes up 10% of the keywords for max clicks. It's actually a very small percentage, but 31% of the impressions. That's how we expect, broad match to expand. Now, most advertisers are limiting max clicks usage to exact and phrase match, which I found interesting because there is no conversion feedback loop for bidding. So this is just, can we get the most clicks possible? Now, of course, as advertisers, we want some performance data, and we look at the efficiency of max clicks match types. Well, exact match, as expected, is by far the highest click-through rate. That's not unusual. What is unusual is broad is actually better than phrase. That's sort of an odd one to see. And it doesn't happen often that broad's CTR is better than phrase, but max clicks is one it does happen. CPA, broad match is actually better than exact. Now, Part of this is people who are using max clicks, they don't have much data. So Google is pretty much showing this for everything related, and broad can sometimes steal impressions from exact match. And therefore, or you got to take the CPAs with a grain of salt since exact match doesn't care about conversions. Now, when we start looking at conversions, right, max conversion is usually most smaller companies' starting place. I want conversions. I don't have a lot. I'm not sure how to bid this. So let me start with max conversions. So max conversions goal, it's just the most conversions possible, right? Now, it doesn't care about the cost of those conversions, right? Obviously, it doesn't care about ROAS and revenue. It's a CPA bid system. So when we look at companies using max conversions, exact match by far the highest use, right? Followed by freeze and lastly broad match. And broad match is actually a very small percentage of max click usage. Now, again, as expected, broad match might be a very small percentage of the keywords, is actually a pretty healthy percentage of the impressions. Now, this is where we start to see data that gets a little convoluted, right? Because our goal is just to get the most conversions. So exact match, best click-through rate, the best ROAS, again, ROAS doesn't matter, right? And the best conversion rate by a little bit, not a lot, right? Exact match, lower click-through rate, a little bit lower CTR or conversion rate than exact, a higher CPA than exact, a higher CPA than broad. This is a pattern we're going to see where with max clicks, or sorry, max conversions, exact match performs the best. Broad actually outperforms phrase match. And we'll get into why in a bit. But off of max conversions, phrase match is doing a very poor job. And we'll see why in a little bit here. Now, as you get more and more conversions, you often then graduate from max conversions to target CPA, right? And with target CPA, you're telling Google, hit my CPA target. I want to spend $20 a conversion, get me $20 conversions. So again, target CPA doesn't care about ROAS, revenue, or conversion volume, right? Max conversions says, get me the most conversions possible, but I don't care about the CPA. Target CPA, right, is completely opposite. It's like, I want to hit my CPA, but don't care about the getting that last conversion if it breaks my CPA. So when we put some numbers together, right, to sort of compare what this looks like. Let's say I have a $105 budget, and these are some conversions available. Now, this is made up because we never know the exact numbers, right? And Google's like, okay, you're bidding max conversions. So my goal is to get all the cheap ones. I'm not going to capture them all. So I get a bunch of conversions. I get 6 for this budget. They're about, $16. And target bidding, you said, okay, I want a $15 CPA. So Google goes out, and again, their goal is a blended CPA. It's not a cutoff. So if I have a bunch of cheap conversions and there's an expensive one, well, Google can get the expensive one because blended, it's still meeting my goals, right? And my CPA, it's roughly similar, maybe a little bit higher, a little lower, right? My conversion are the same. And at its budget level, it looks like, well, there's no difference. And in reality, with this many conversions available, there is no difference. This for an actual account, target CPA may not do well with only 6 conversions possible. That's a different story, illustration purposes. But let's say I like this, I want more. So I double my budget. So what we have in green, right, is our original budget, 105. Red is 210, right? I double my budget. So max conversion says, give me it all. If it's possible and I have the budget left, I'm going to go for it. So its conversions go up. And of course, it gets more and more expensive conversions. Its CPA goes up too. And it will try to spend the entire budget, right? So it maxes up the budget. Now, target CPA, right? It gets some conversions, says, well, that's too expensive. If I get those, I'll be too far above the CPA, so I should stop. Right. And so it gets a little less conversions than max conversions, but its budget spent is significantly lower because it knows to constrain itself, or otherwise it'll blow away the goal. And this is why, as you raise budget, right, sometimes max conversions, you're like, why is it so expensive suddenly? The goal of max conversions is most conversions. It does not care about CPA, right? So as budgets go up, often you're transitioning to a target system. Now, sometimes it gets even worse, right? Let's say we raise our budget even more, and there's a few conversions out there that are really expensive because they're a bunch of low quality traffic that eventually one converts. So in a case like this, where max conversions, it's going to try to spend our budget again. And suddenly its CPA doubled what it was before, and its conversions only went up a touch, right? Where again, Target says, I can't afford that, it stops. And conceptually, this is a big difference that's important to understand about the difference. So with max conversions, right, exact match works great, and broad match works well, mostly because that previous search history. Most people using target CPA have higher budgets, right? And they have more data for their accounts. So, when we look at target CPA usage, once again, more people use exact match than any other bid method. And once again, while phrase and broad are similar in usage, broad dominates the impressions, right? That's something common. But when we get into the stats themselves, the best click-through rate, exact match. I mean, we should expect this, followed by phrase and broad. Conversion rates, exact phrase broad. CPA, phrase match suddenly does well. Now we've seen phrase match with higher CPA so far for other bid methods. Now CPA for phrase is lower than broad match. And that's because these campaign types have more data. And that's sort of a trend we're going to see with phrase match is it's great with a lot of data. It's very poor with very little data, right? It's a huge difference. Now, this is for non-brand generic words. And I wanted just to show the difference, right, between what non-brand words look like in branded accounts. So this is what a brand campaign looks like. That's actually, in this case, we added brand to the generic data set. So this is just everything combined, which means brand is so strong, it raised the generic that much that the click-through rates are significantly higher. The conversion rates are significantly higher. And we see even more of a difference between the effectiveness of CPA by exact phrase and broad match. Right? And so as data increases, then phrase does better. As data is lower, then broad usually does better. Now, okay, so I have max conversions and I have target CPA. When do most people switch between the two bid methods? So I have a huge data set I'm looking at. And I, of course, just start with averages, right? What's the average conversion by this? And I'm like, well, this doesn't tell me anything. And I started looking at a lot of data, a lot of different ways of looking at it, and realized it's actually median is really the true number to look at of where does that average sort of fit, the median, the middle of the data set. And max conversion, median conversions per campaign was 29, right? Target CPA, it was 39. Now, we've heard for years that, usually at 30 plus conversions per month, then target's better than max. At under 30 conversions a month, max is better than target. Happens to be true. It really is that switch right around 30 conversions a month. Target outperforms max. And that's also when advertisers switch. So it was sort of good to see that this, conventional wisdom, which hasn't been challenged in a long time, is true. It really is sort of an overall good rule to think about is, we break 30 conversions consistently per month. We should probably use target more than max. Vice versa, if we have less, we should use max more. Now, there's exceptions. If you are not constrained by CPA, you want the most conversions, even if they're expensive with your huge budget. Note that max is better than CPA. So you have to remember what's the goal of them. Now, if we switch to e-commerce, right? Usually the starting place is max conversion value. I want the most value, regardless of the ROAS, right? The CPA, even the conversion volume, because if in theory, if one sale is $100,000, that's better than 50 sales of 1,000 each, right? It doesn't usually work out that way, but then Google's not quite that smart yet. But the goal is really the most revenue regardless of other metrics. Now, when we look at this is the first bid method where every match type is pretty equally used by advertisers. But when we look at the stats themselves, exact match is the best conversion rate. It's the best click-through rate. We've seen this everywhere. It's the lowest CPA, but broad match has a better return on ad spend. Right now, I was looking at this like, okay, so broad match has a better click-through rate than phrase. Who cares? It has a lower conversion rate by far than the other two match types, but it has a higher return on ad spend. So I started digging the data. I'm like, okay, I need to see what's behind this story here. And it turns out that when someone's looking for a specific product, like one item, they search that item. Now, most advertisers are pretty sophisticated. They have a list of every single product they sell in exact match. Well, I want this. I have this exact match. There's a quick sale. But it's a quick sale of usually a single item. Then you have users who are more shoppers, that they're looking around and they add something to their cart, they leave, they come back, they add something to their cart, and at the end, they have healthy checkout amounts. But their conversions are really low because they jump around a lot. Right? So this is why broad match has such a good return on ad spend. It's because usually when people check out with multiple items in the cart, not just what they searched for, they match to a broad match term. So this again is where when you're using max conversion value, often you want to say, this is my product. And this will be the most competitive terms, but it's also the most clear ads you have. It's in your product feeds, it's perfect, exact match. Then we have these other terms that they're not always going to sell. Some days they'll be good, some days they'll be bad, but they end up with those higher carts across the larger time spans. So often then when you expand, you're expanding with broad match for that cart value in those more shoppers. Again, phrase match is our worst performing one here. So with the max conversion value, we could skip phrase in many cases. Now, again, if you see keywords doing fantastically, you might add them in phrase. I'm not saying never use phrase in these instances, but use it more sparingly and don't be afraid to use more broad match. Okay, so usually then we have target ROAS, so we go up from max conversion value. So again, target return on ad spend is used by mid-sized and larger advertisers. So in this case, right, the goal is my ROAS target. I want it 300%, 4%, whatever return, hit that. I don't care about total revenue now, right? I don't care about conversion volume. My goal is a ROAS target. So this is again where the most used keyword by far is exact match, right? Again, broad has the fewer keywords, but more impressions. Now, when we look at click-through rate, exact wins. Look at conversion rate, exact wins. When we look at return on ad spend, exact wins by not by much, right? It's 301 versus 291. I mean, there's very little difference. And this is where as your overall conversions increase, right? And Google has bid signals, previous search history, keywords on landing pages, et cetera, to use for broad match. Broad match does pretty well. Now, again, I want to illustrate an anomaly happening here. So our conversion rates go exact phrase broad. Our return on ad spend goes exact phrase broad. Our CPA is exact broad phrase. Google just really struggles with phrase match a lot of the times. Now, if we add brand terms again to our normal data set, exact just shows its power, right? Its CTR is like over double everyone else. Its conversion rate's higher. Its ROAS is not quite double, but it's close to double. So as you're getting into those, high volume brand terms, That's just where exact match is still by far the best match type. And even if you want to use broad, you should still add things in exact match for your impression share data, quality score analysis, and so forth. So, then I again wanted to know, when are people switching from max conversion value to target return on ad spend? This is convoluted data. So I looked at this from a revenue standpoint, a ROAS standpoint, average conversions, median conversions, total revenue, looking for patterns, and there's not fantastic ones. And it's a mixture of conversions and revenue when companies are switching between the two. So someone with at least 73 conversions a month is more likely to use target ROAS than max conversions. But in reality, a lot of it's actually about campaign revenue. So under 4,000 a month, right? Max conversion value was by far the most common. Between 4,000 and 9,000, they're about equal. Now, between 9 and 24,000, so we're some big jumps here, right? Target ROAS is more common than max conversions, but they're both used quite a bit. I say more common, it was like a 65-35 split. And then over 25K a month, target ROAS is the primary used. So the switch is generally 20 to 25 to 50 conversions a month and at least 4,000 in revenue. Essentially, when you're switching between max conversions and target ROAS, and this is for search, does not include products, right? What you're looking for is consistency in what's converting. So, for instance, if you go pull up the last 6 months and you grab your search query data and you look at your conversions for the last 6 months for your search terms, and the vast majority of them are 3 or under, right? And you have a lot of ones, meaning this month this one converted, this month this other search term converted. It's very random, right? That's when max often does better because there's no predictable patterns, right? Google loves patterns, so they're really bad at things that are truly random. Now, if you were to look at that last 6 months of conversions, and yeah, you're still going to have a lot of one-offs, right? Everyone's going to have a bunch of it was 111, but you see, your top 10, 15% of search terms, maybe top 25%, all have more consistent numbers. They're all 5, 20, 50, 100, whatever, and they consistently get those conversions. You see consistency. That's usually the indicator that you could switch to target ROAS. So, 25 to 50 conversions, 4,000 revenue, that's a guideline. But in reality, you're looking for predictable returns that the system can use. Right, target impression share. Well, it only cares about impression share, right? It doesn't care about anything but impressions. So, no surprise, by far, the most used match type is exact. It is the one of only 2 bid strategies where exact match actually led the number of impressions, right? I mean, the goal is impressions here. Now, there's a reason for this, right? With target impression share, you tell Google, I want these keywords to have, this impression share. It's impressions. When you use broad and sometimes even phrase with target impression share, right? You start matching to crazy stuff because you tell Google, judge me by the impression. So you might have brand terms, and this is a very common a bid strategy, where you say, I've got only my brand terms, and you use them as broad match and target impression share. You'll see all kinds of brands show up in a search terms report. Or the second most common reason for target impression share bidding is conquest campaigns. They're competitor terms. You're like, let's make a campaign of our competitor names and see things. So again, that's where exact, maybe some phrase really gets what you're looking for in the end. Because again, while we can see ROAS and CPA and sort of by match types, the bid system doesn't care about it, right? It just cares about getting to your impression numbers. So generally, you want to be conservative in match type usage with target IS. Now we have full control. Hey, I want to do manual bidding. I want full control of everything. which means Google doesn't care about anything because their system doesn't give feedback to my bids. So, you would expect, right, exact match to dominate um, exact match bidding with a little bit of phrase and broad. And from a high level, that's what we see. Now, when I looked at the stats, I was a little blown away and cautious here because, all right, exact match best click through rate. We'd expect that. It's exact match best conversion rate, exact match lowest CPA. Okay, that all makes sense. The CPA of phrase match is concerning. And I was like, okay, I understand why phrase match does poorly with the max conversions and max conversion value bidding because it doesn't have a lot of data and Google doesn't use all their bid technology for it. So phrase ends up, expanding to bad stuff. It doesn't make sense for CPC bidding. So I had to dig further, into the data, see what's going on here. And it turns out manual CPC is used by two very different groups. One are companies with really high cost per clicks, often a minimum of $100 averages. It's common to see $500 and $600 bids, and they are primarily using exact and phrase match. Now, the second group using this bid method is usually very low volume accounts. They're either niche products or they're small geographies. Now, those companies are using exact and broad match. So what's happening here is the exact match data is a combination of super high CPCs and low volume. The broad match is only low volume. The phrase match is only the super high CPCs. So that's why don't be afraid of the CPA of phrase match here to use it if you're using manual bidding. It's more of an effect of the users who use this bid method. Now, I mentioned phrase match quite a bit, and the problem with phrase match is it looks like how broad match did 10 years ago, where you see it matching to other brand terms matching to generic terms matching to some crazy queries that make no sense, generic words matching to brands, right? So exact match is what someone's looking for. Broad match gets used as additional signals, right? And phrase match has the capability of expanding like the old broad match, but Google's kept, the technology to rein it back in with additional items like what's on your landing page, what did someone look for before, right, from phrase match. So at low conversion volumes, phrase match is something worth really examining if you should remove it, or maybe not all of it, but a healthy portion of it. At high conversion levels, it does okay. There's enough data for Google to realize, okay, we're setting really bad bids for phrase match. But in the end, it's powerful enough that people are still getting good results. So it really is, target CPA, target ROAS, manual CPC, target impression share. If you're watching it, phrase match as well. And often you're going to use phrase before broad. When you get into the max items, right, max conversions, max conversion value, that's where there's not a lot of data, so there's no consistency for the machine to look at. And that's where Google starts to expand phrase, but never reins it back in. And so, it's sort of a shame that a lot of people's one of our favorite match types, it doesn't do well in a lot of situations. So it's worth re-examining how it is performing for you. Now, I also just wanted to know what's everyone using, right? We have thousands and thousands of campaigns. What's the most common used bid method? And I was surprised to see max conversions was roughly 1/3 of every single campaign's bid strategy. So max conversions by far number one. Second, target CPA, right? Then followed by max clicks, then target ROAS, right? Manual CPC, max conversion value. It was lower used than I expected. I actually expected more max conversion value than target ROAS. And of course, target impression share is a very niche bid strategy, so it's overall used the least. So Now there are more lead gen companies than e-commerce companies. So it would make sense that Max Conversions, a lot of small lead gen companies, every small mom and pop home services company is Max Conversions, and that is the correct bid method for them. Right? As they graduate, they got to target CPA. Right? If you can't get the conversion tracking to work, they won't install the conversion tracking, or you have a brand new campaign, you just want to kind of get some data to make some decisions. Right? That's where Max Clicks comes into play. And then we have the big e-commerce companies, right, that target ROAS, or a lot of mid-sized companies have enough sales to use target ROAS. But manual CPC being 9% still, which doesn't mean they're setting manual bids, right? So like we have advertisers who have in-house bid systems. They've built their own bid systems looking at various data sets together to set bids. So they're automating their bids, but in Google Ads, right, it's set as manual CPC. So there is that other group of manual CPC bidders, which are automating with a non-Google technology. Now, I also wanted to know for people without conversions, right? A lot of campaigns without any conversions. What are people using? So again, I was surprised. Max Conversions was number one, which means they want conversions. They're just either A, not getting them, or they haven't figured out how to install conversion tracking correctly. Right, one of the two. Max Clicks being second makes sense. Manual CPC, which makes sense. And then so the ones who are using target CPA, that's when you start to and target ROAS. I think your conversion tracking is broken. Now, I looked at no conversions for a 90-day window, so there was no conversions for 90 days. So that's a long time for broken conversion tracking, but it happens. Target impression share being 4% does not surprise me without conversions, because that whole conquest campaign thing comes into play too. Now, lastly, I'm doing a lot of comparison between brand and generic. I wanted to know, okay, this is the overall, like globally with conversions, Max Conversions is the most used by CPA. When you don't have conversions, Max Conversions, Max Clicks, manual makes sense. What do brands use? And when I looked at brand campaigns, it was surprising that target CPA was 63% of them. I mean, this is truly dominant number from a bid strategy standpoint, followed by target return on ad spend, right? Which, is again, a very brand common one. This is also the highest percentage of target impression share, which hit 5%. So brand campaigns, it's 1 in 20 brand campaigns uses target impression share bidding. But this was, a huge number to see. Target CPA is what brands with decent amounts of data, what they turn to first, and target ROAS second. I think that says a lot about the bid strategies. So, when you think about what match type and bid strategy should you be using, right? If you have a lot of conversions, right? So target ROAS or target CPA really is your best. And when you think about keyword expansion, you're generally going to follow the classic tale of exact phrase broad, right? Watch that phrase match, but with enough volume, phrase usually outperforms broad. With low conversion campaigns, you're probably going to do more max revenue, max conversions, and skip phrase match. I can't imagine 5 years ago, 3 years ago, me ever saying you should use broad over phrase match. This is a new statement for me to be saying publicly, right? Like, no, in reality, for low volume campaigns, broad outperforms phrase. Broad uses keywords in the ad group, data on the landing page, previous search history. Phrase match expands like broad, but doesn't get these signals. So, for the smaller value, start with exact still. Exact still wins. But don't be afraid of broad. Broad in the past 12 to 18 months has gotten better by leaps and bounds than the previous 20 years. I started paid search. Well, when I started paid search, there was no such thing as match type. Match types came out roughly 2004, 2004. So it took Google about 20 years to make broad good, but broad match is now in place. It is okay to use a lot more broad match than you have in the past. All right, with that, we're obviously doing this with the Paid Search Association. I will put the deck on the PSA website after this. It's free to join, so free offers are hard to turn down. So if you're not a member yet, go take a look. Secondly, I am one of the co-founders of Analysis. We are a marketing platform for Google and Bing ads, Google and Microsoft ads. I'll say Bing forever. If you're looking for better workflows, looking to automate your accounts, et cetera, we offer 30-day free trials. See how much time savings and efficiency savings you can get. If you want to connect, you can always find me on LinkedIn, and we write a great blog. I'm the primary writer there on Analysis as well. All right, and with that, let us jump to questions. I see quite a few have come in, and see what conversation we have going on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to put the question up on the screen just so you can see it, and then, have at it. So this is there a point in still adding all these match types into the account when we have automated bidding?
Yes. Oh gosh, I can't say this enough. Okay. I'm going to take a moment here, but it actually needs this much time. So one, if you don't add the keyword, you don't add the actual keywords, you don't know your quality score, you don't know your impression share data to understand what's getting what type of data, and you don't know what ad's going to be served. Now, I'm going to explain this. So let's say, I'm just going to make up some stuff real quick. So let's say I sell real estate. I've got one ad group that's condos for sale. I have one ad group that's townhouses for sale. I have one ad group that's homes for sale. I have one ad group that's townhomes for sale. Broad match says these are 4 dwellings. So if you search for apartments for sale, Google might show you my condo ad group. Right now, if you only have broad match or even phrase match, sadly enough, if you have exact match, Google first says, is there a search term that is the same as this query, right? And that will trump it. Now, broad match, technically, if Google were here, they would say, oh, broad match can also do this, right? But it doesn't always follow that rule, especially with AI Max. So by adding those as exact match keywords, exact match trumps, especially with PMax as well, it makes sure the correct ad group is being displayed. So if you use, PMax, if there's a search theme the same as your keywords, then only exact match will ensure PMax doesn't show, right? And that's important when you start thinking search will outperforms PMax when in a search ad, right? Not in a product ad, of course, or display. So it's about making sure when someone does a search, is valuable, that the right ad and landing page are being used. So that's really where exact matches power truly matters here, from not just a stat standpoint, from how Google ad serving works. All right, that was probably way too long-winded, but it's that important actually.
No, I thought that was really super helpful. I always learn so much from these, which, speaking of, since exact and broad are already included in broad, and this one is more, Google has all these additional signals. So would you say that that is still correct from pulling in all that data?
Google has the signals, but they don't use things like previous search history to set bids for exact match, right? So they have the data for setting bids. Where Google gets messy is what ad group an ad should show. That's where Google doesn't always do a great job. And whenever people say we're optimizing our accounts, I'm like, what does that mean? Right? In many ways, we're taking some control over how our ads are served. It's really, in the end, like it's like Google's great with a lot of stuff and they're amazing at math, but they're not great at making sure the user intent of I search for this and you happen to have this, I should show these together.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So this is again kind of the same question, but do you see any point in using manual CPC to stack bids between match type before we have enough conversion data?
No, I mean, no. The reason to use manual CPC is you have data Google doesn't, and you can do some bid adjustments they can't. If you need to use certain bid adjustments, so like locate when you get into, location and time of day and a lot of these ones, Google ignores them for certain things, and you may have a more sophisticated way of actually setting your bids. And of course, if there's no conversion data or you can't legally pass conversion data, which sometimes your regulated industries it comes up, that's the time to use it for brand new campaigns. I mean, we used to set manual bids and $1 for exact, 75 cents for phrase, 50 cents for broad, whatnot. You don't need to do it anymore. Turn on max conversions, max clicks, get some data, then switch to a real bid strategy.
That makes sense. So our next question, I was scrolling through because we have a lot. So I'm going to try to get to all of them. Glad you left a lot of time here. So based on this data, is there still a reason to use exact match since they outperform broad? And then phrase is more questionable. Sorry, I love these because they're all dancing around the same theme.
Yes. I mean, it's the same question, right? I mean, in the end, right? It's yes. So if you don't add a keyword, you don't know if it will show or not. So you're trusting Google to show it. If you add something as a keyword, you've now signaled to them you want to consistently show for this. This also goes for the remove redundant keywords recommendation. I can't count the times I've seen people remove redundant keywords and can't figure out where the conversions went, right? Or their ad serving got worse because they removed the keywords. Now Google can serve any of these different ad groups and conversions go down. So if there's a recommendation I always ignore, it's remove redundant keywords, because you're setting signals for the machine of how to show the ads. Exact match is another signal. Don't take it away from it. You're on mute, Sarah.
Sorry about that. I'm learning a lot here and kind of shocked because I can admit sometimes I say the opposite. So with that, are these purely search campaign?
Yeah. Okay. 100% search campaigns. There was no display, no PMAX, just search.
All right. And so this one is interesting. So presumably this analysis is on a range of account types, or is it predominantly e-com? Have you run this on e-com versus lead gen, and are there differences?
This is a segment across everyone. It's not just lead gen or just e-com. The big difference really is on who uses what bid method. Max conversion value and target ROAS are much more likely to use by e-com than lead gen. Now, there's some exceptions, right? And vice versa. Target CPA, much more likely to use by lead gen than e-commerce. Again, some exceptions. So they're not, I have not split them e-com versus lead gen because I don't know the goal of every advertiser in our system. I know they're, they don't tell us which type they are. So you can't, just as they're bringing in conversion data or revenue data, doesn't mean it's e-commerce. So there's no scalable way to segment it for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this one's also interesting. It's interesting. It takes me back to the old days. When you say broad match, do you mean standalone campaigns or mixed with other keywords in that?
In general, mixed with other keywords.
Yeah.
There are exceptions, right? Where, you really want to split out budgets by something, or you have different offer types. So there's exceptions to every rule you're going to see. But in general, same campaign.
Okay, that makes sense. This one is really interesting. Just a clarification. They do not cannibalize each other.
No, add them all. You can have every match type. It's fine.
My jaw.
I feel like I'm hearing Google reps like recommendations coming through here.
My jaw is kind of on the floor right now. So I'm loving this, Brad. So we have a next one. Oh, wait, we already
That
asked
was
that
previous.
about
Yep.
account types. I'm sorry about that. So many questions. Okay. So, do you think that maximize clicks, Google is likely to send more traffic?
Um, well, yeah, because you said I want clicks. I don't care about the quality of the clicks. So, and you know what? It's not Google's fault.
Right.
Let me just give. I want to give an example here, right? So, let's say you sell insurance, right? And you have this keyword insurance, and it's a $20 CPC. And then there's these other keywords. What's the average price I should pay for pet insurance? Do I have to have insurance? Right? And Google's like, well, these are low quality clicks. They're 10 cents each. So now you've told Google, I want the most clicks. So they could get this one $20 click, which is good, or they could get like 5,000 of these really cheap bad ones. You told them I'd rather have these 5,000 cheap clicks than this really qualified $20 click. So it's not Google's fault. It's low quality traffic, right? It's actually an instruction you gave them. You're on mute again, Sarah.
Sorry, I keep muting so we don't hear background noise.
Oh, you're good.
So this one's good. Should you use max conversions even if you have limited data or it's a new account? We know we're not supposed to, but should they?
Actually, max conversions, that's good. That's a good case for it, right? So when you have low amounts of conversion data, max conversions is a decent bid method because you're still using some bid signals. So I would absolutely say yes. And if it's a brand new account, either max clicks because you're jump starting it, don't stay there, right? Or max conversions, it's good for a new account because again, assuming you have conversion tracking, you're just telling Google, I don't have a lot of data, but please use what I have to make better decisions.
Next question. What about you just had talked about this? So somebody that cannot have conversion tracking due to compliance.
Exact and maybe a little bit of phrase, and you're going to stop there because broad match will match to everything, and the only thing that reigns in broad match is conversion data signals to rein it in. If you don't have a conversion data feedback loop, broad match goes insane. So do not use broad match without conversion tracking.
And then with that, in your experience, do you see anything similar with Google versus Microsoft?
Yes, I didn't do a full Microsoft analysis. Anecdotally, the data looks very similar between the two. And, Microsoft, the only thing I would say is Microsoft's broad match sometimes gets too broad compared to Google. I think Google does a better job than Microsoft of reining in broad match. What do you think, Sarah? What do you think of Microsoft's broad match?
I think it's a loose cannon.
Yeah.
And I just am going to answer that quickly because of background noise, but I have seen so much. I've seen emojis in my match term reports.
Yeah. So the exact on Microsoft, I'd probably really lean more exact phrase and skip a lot of the broad. I think it's just they don't have a lot of impressions. I think broad just goes too broad.
But when it comes to that, I think also like I'm a big proponent of like using the data to teach your business, right? Like that is what I preach in my consultancy. So with that, I think it's a really, really good thing to look at and then see, can I take that learning into ads and how I treat them across all strategies? And then, so I sort of appreciate the looseness in some ways. And then I would also say, like, just from a perspective of looking at both Google and Microsoft, just your SEO data in Search Console and Webmaster Tools is an exercise in what Broadmatch is doing on the paid side. That's my belief mostly. We have way more questions coming in. Okay, so
I think you skipped one.
It was a validation, but I might pop back to that.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
So your own tool, what errors do you see people?
Oh gosh. Oh well, I see, Sarah. Thank you. So, number one error is keyword conflicts. So many people, which is essentially your negative keywords are blocking your positive keywords, And so many companies have negative keyword lists from 10 years ago, and Google in their conflicts report does not take into account campaign negative lists. I can't count the times people are blocking a lot of their top keywords and don't know it because they're showing for other impressions or getting conversions, right? Just not for their actual words. That's a common one. Misspellings in ads. I know Google like will tell people like, hey, this is misspelled, and sometimes disable ads. I've been amazed at how many misspellings actually exist in ads. It's a super common one. Um, not actually ending ad tests, probably a really common one too, because you know what? If you have two ads and one well outperforms the other one, pausing the worst one gets you more conversions. Many people forget the pause button. That's probably another huge one. Not managing budgets effectively. And I mean, my favorite tool in the system isn't actually an error, it's a time frame comparison visualizer, which snapshots times to compare how different things change. And I think that's actually a wonderful diagnosis tool, which is my favorite personally. Anyway, you're on mute, but I can read it for you. Totally makes sense. Does it ever make sense to use max clicks? Yes. So, I saw this question. I was thinking of an example. So, like, we'll see, Regal Cinemas will do 1-day events of movies, right? Like, hey, so and so showing for a single day. They need to get as many eyeballs onto this offer as possible, right? Within, 72 hours or whatever. And they don't, because it's a limited event time, they won't ever get enough conversion data to give a feedback loop to the system of what to do. Max Clicks is great in a situation like that. You have no data at all and you're just trying to get somewhere, right? Max Clicks can be useful. I know this one's awful, but there are times you are in a use it or lose it budget world and it's the end of a quarter and you're like, I just need to spend it regardless of what I get back. Max Clicks is very good for that. I hate this. I hate it, but then it's a reality of many companies, right? Especially end of year when you're like, if we don't spend our budget, they won't give it to us next year. We got to spend it. Things like that, right? So usually when you want eyeballs, but you can't get feedback fast enough to send the system, usually limited time events type stuff. That being said, e-commerce companies don't think this is your sales strategy, right? Because even if it's a short-term sale, you have predictable conversion data Google can use to set bids, right? You're better off with, using either seasonal adjustments or, when adding keywords in an existing campaign, so you have that feedback loop. It's really more, we don't usually advertise to this region. We're setting up something for a week. And Netflix is good for that.
Okay. That's perfect. And then I'm going to skip over the next one because I also asked about max clicks again. And then back to your tool. Is there anything that has changed in your tool the past year?
Oh gosh, yes. It's so hard for me to think of timeframes because I'm just in it all the time. We've added a whole lot more budget things to it. I think we've gone deeper in the PMAX analysis of stuff. I know there's more. The budget things we've gone into is whether it's automatic pacing versus automated management, etc. I know there's more, but I'm just blanking on it, which is sad because it's I live in this thing. But that's probably our big stuff is really budgets. Well, and we do full management, but in the last year, probably more with PMAX and budgets than anything else.
Man, there's so many questions. I'm a little jealous because I have some too. So here's a good one. They're asking about AI Max, essentially.
So AI Max is in its own match type, of course. When you turn on AI Max, it will make every keyword in your account considered also broad match. Now, if you have the broad match version, it will obviously honor that. AI Max is still very hit and miss. My biggest complaint about AI Max is it will steal exact match impressions in some instances. I've even chatted with Genius about this. I don't quite understand how this happens, but it surely does. It also takes credits then for those impressions. So when you look at the totals for AI Max, they include clicks you would have gotten if AI Max didn't exist. So I think that's kind of broken. I have high hopes for the automated ad text creation in like 2 or 3 years, not now, because you know what? It will make site links and callouts at the ad group level for everything. If they become useful, me to have 1,000 ad groups and AI Max to go, here are 4 relevant callouts for every single ad group that are different and unique to each one, that's huge. They suck right now. I mean, some are decent, but for the most part, they're pretty bad. But it's my real hope for AI Max is actually extensions. I know it sounds terrible.
No,
you do not need AI Max to show up in AI overviews. I'll make sure that's clear too. Broad match will show in AI overviews. So I think AI Max has a future. I just think it's still 2 or 3 years away.
Yeah. And then this question, 20 years ago, granular counts, manual CPC. Should we trust the automation more with tens of thousands of ad groups? Should we simplify?
So, okay, there's ad groups and there's campaigns.
Correct.
Right? Ad group is keywords and ads and landing pages that are highly related. You know, if you have tens of thousands of highly related keyword, ad, landing page groupings, don't simplify it. Now, where simplification or slower structures or smaller structures is better is aggregating data for bid purposes. Fewer campaigns is more useful than what it was because you have more data aggregation. Now, if you're doing granular structures like this is my, SCAGs. I always hated SCAGs to begin with. SCAGs were never needed. If you separated out your ad groups by match types, you don't need it unless you are really making different ads by match types, which some brands actually do. They have their exact phrase and their broad, slightly different messaging on for brands. If your ad doesn't change, you don't need a new ad group, right? In reality, write an ad, pick a landing page. If 1,000 keywords match it, 1,000 keywords match it. But it's really about the ad and landing page. It's an ad group, not a keyword group.
Yeah, no, that's, again, it's so interesting how 2 experts can do things differently.
Do you do it? Do you make thousands of ad groups?
I do not, but like I'm listening to this, like I am a big fan of cutting the noise and getting rid of a lot of these keywords and redundancy in the account. And I try to teach, because like my clients, they typically just cannot get over the fact that they want every single keyword. But I also kind of recognize we're talking about 2 different things, right? So they want to put in super, super long tail. And I want to bucket that a little for the data decision making. So it's an interesting, it gives me pause and consideration.
And so for everything stated, right, I think the segmentation that's missing is budget.
Yeah.
Because you know what? We have some of our accounts spend well over $10 million a month. You know what? The way that is structured should be very different than somebody who spends $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
If you spend $2,000 a month, you shouldn't have 10,000 ad groups.
Correct.
Right? It's not that you've wasted your time. So, when you say bucketing things, if you're spending $5,000 a month, then it's not, you're better off calling people back on the phone than you are making more ad groups, right?
Correct.
So use fewer. But don't forget, there's a business decision of, is my time better elsewhere?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So any thoughts on pausing legacy keywords for an account structure and relaunching them in a more organized ad group?
Sure. I mean, if you're looking at like, I want to pause these because I'm remaking stuff, go for it. Now, the big question these days, and Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, right, is if you're going to rebuild everything, which a lot of companies take the time to rebuild everything, you can rebuild it in the same campaign, meaning you still have conversion data from that campaign. You could say, I want to wipe my history, which is never truly wiped or whatever, and make a new campaign. I can do it whenever I want to. I should do it piecemeal. I should wait for a downtime and do it when we have really low business. Like December, the most common month for lead gen companies to reorganize, right? Because end of December, the whole industry dies. So are you in the camp of let's do it slowly over time so we don't disrupt the system? Do we just do it all at once? We just shock everything but we're done fast? How do you do it?
Well, so I mean, I come from the age of being burned by these. I think one thing that you said about your data or your history never really goes away. So I have this firm belief that an account has an overarching brain and it's been trained. Because I remember back in the 2015 reorgs, you could break an account or it would function and it really shouldn't function.
Yep.
And so I never, ever, it was a firm thing. And I've gotten in arguments with people about this, like, internally. I do not just pause everything and just relaunch a campaign. I do a hybrid. So like the best example is I had a campaign that was like 55 campaigns. I wanted to bring it down to 25. I went slowly through that. Ideally, I would have brought it down to like 5 or 10, just centralizing that budget. That is my approach. And I literally will download all the keywords and the ad groups and I'll look at like what everything's getting to centralize slowly. But I've been burned before. And then the old fashioned dial, down a budget and dial up a budget and just watch it. And then if you do have occasionally, I'm going to call them those like rogue campaigns, right? Like they were built, they have a strong ROAS, a strong performance, they're meeting goals, but like, from like a human data analysis framework, you're like, this is getting like 2 conversions, which is why the ROAS is good. I still keep it, but I'll explain to the business owner, like, ideally I'd centralize this, but it's performing so well, I really don't want to touch it. But this is why it's so high, because it's so little data, right?
Yeah. So I usually go for let's do a little bit over time. Though again, for small accounts, sometimes just bite the bullet and do it, right? I mean, again, you have to watch it, but I've been amazed. So the campaigns I hate the most in reorgs it's an old campaign. In fact, I believe in our system, we still have over 10 million STAs.
Yeah.
So single headline, 2 description ads. They do amazing, right? And sometimes someone will pause one, like, where do our conversions go? And it's a stupid STA that's got $50 million of history that Google you can't get rid of. And so you can't move it because you can't move an STA, right? So sometimes there are sometimes legacy stuff which just locks you into what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking we probably have 4 or 5 questions left. What I can do, and I think it'll help our PSA social media, is since these came in on LinkedIn, I can tag you in if you don't see them and you can answer them in the comments so people still get those. And then if they're on YouTube, same thing, or I can always grab them and put them on LinkedIn too and centralize it, if that would help. Because I want to make sure people get their questions, but this was absolutely amazing. I'm going to put Melissa's comment up here because
thanks, Melissa.
And
I'll put the deck on the PSA website later today. So
awesome.
If you're looking for the deck, you have to join PSA. Sorry, but it's good for you, so it doesn't matter.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I echo what Melissa said. I feel like I learned a lot. But this was absolutely amazing. And maybe I'll pick your brain after we end the live stream. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.